Hello everyone and welcome to this very special Q&A live from Old Trafford after Manchester United beat Liverpool 2-1. I'm Joe Prince-Wright, the lead writer and editor over at Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com. Delighted to say I'm joined by Nick Mandola in Buffalo, New York, and Andy Edwards in Kansas City for this very special Pro Soccer Talk Live. Gents, firstly, let's get your instant reaction to this incredible win for United here. This place was buzzing. There's still a great buzz and atmosphere around it as people are going off into the Manchester night. The home fans at least celebrating. You can see the Liverpool fans behind me just being kept in. But that was a display full of grit, determination, pure heart from United. That was really needed after those two defeats to open up the season for Erik ten Hag's side. So, Nick, I'm going to come to you first. What a display, what a win. What do you think about that from Manchester United today?
You couldn't draw up a better situation, a better way when your first win is also a statement win. And if you're Erik ten Hag, you're looking around and look, they got some breaks to go their way. Starting from the starting lineup, Andy and I were talking about this off air. I thought Fabinho not being out there was an interesting, of all the players to not play, an interesting player to miss out. Ten Hag can now claim he pushed a lot of the right buttons. Taking Harry Maguire out was brave. Keeping out Ronaldo less so because of the way it works his system. Martinez stood up for him, for all that talk about him being 5'10". I think he had 5 clearances and a couple of block shots. And perhaps I don't want this to get lost in the shuffle because Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford and Bruno Fernandes, they all had great games. But how about a first huge Premier League start for Tyrell Malacia to go up against Mohamed Salah? And I'm not going to say he was in his pocket, but he was about as much as that was going to be through the first hour of the match. And he was right on his back. He was right on his back, and he forced Salah to be a playmaker. And you'll take that when you're talking about a Ballon d'Or candidate. So I absolutely think that if the Premier League wanted its storyline to be somewhere after 3 weeks, it's Liverpool below Manchester United in the standings with both of them on the bottom half, and Man City's not even in first.
Andy, your reaction to this, because Liverpool, they were on a 21-game unbeaten run in the Premier League coming into this game. They're not used to losing, a very strange display from them. But as we said, a huge moment for Erik ten Hag and those players Nick mentioned there. Malacia coming into the lineup, Scott McTominay, Rafael Varane, Alanga. It was just really good to see his changes obviously worked and got the big result in the end. They held on at the end, but they were good value, I think, for that 2-1 win.
Yeah, the word I keep coming back to is juxtaposition. The juxtaposition of what we have heard from Manchester United fans the last couple of weeks since the season began to what we saw on the field today, what we've seen from United to what we saw on the field today. And I think also what we've come to expect from Liverpool and what we saw from them today. It was a real, I don't know if you want to say Jekyll and Hyde, but Liverpool having the injuries that they've got, obviously, I think played a huge part into this. And so for anybody that wants to say, oh, Manchester United, they're back. And we had a little conversation before the game, and I jokingly said, United fans kind of think they're one big win away from being back, from being fixed to everything is being all right again. Obviously, this is a big win. I don't think it fixed everything, though. And to kind of make that point, I would just say, one, the injuries, obviously, for Liverpool. But two, it was smart from Ten Hag to, I don't know if this is the right word, but to allow the long balls from David De Gea, not trying to build out of the back quite as much the way that they did against Brentford. We saw how they struggled with that. It was just a much more, I think, mature and responsible approach from United in this game, with Ten Hag a little less insistent on them playing out of the back. So it showed, I think, a willingness to be flexible from him, and I think that's going to be important, especially this first season, if he's going to survive it, get through it, get to the other side when potentially, the good times can come for United, because he's going to have to piece together a lot of victories like this season. They're not going to dominate a lot of teams, especially the big teams in the Premier League this season. And so I think he showed a lot in this game, and I think his players probably showed him a lot as well. He questioned them, hammered them this week in the public with comments, but also with the extra running since the game against Brentford. So very, very positive responses coming out of Old Trafford from the Red Devils. Big worrying times, I think, for Liverpool. You can say it's because of the injuries, but the fact is they have 2 points, 0 wins from their first 3 games. They're not out of the title race, but they are in a big hole.
No one really saw that coming, did they? So we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to discuss the tactical play here. And it was, again, pure fight, pure grit from United. And this game is always about that. But they haven't showed that at all this season. So it was a huge surprise, I think, not only for United to win, but the way they won, the way they ground that kind of belief from somewhere after such a tough opening few weeks of the season. Okay, a lot of comments coming in. Keep them coming in the chat. We're going to get to a few of those in a minute. I'm going to chuck a question out there. Anyone watching? Who was the man of the match? There's a few candidates there, obviously playing for Manchester United, but Nick Mandola, going to come to you. Anybody stand out for you in particular? Defensively, I feel like we're going to pick a few.
Well, listen, I think you could argue for 3 or 4 players. I'll pick one in Malacia. I just think to come into that situation in that spotlight against that opponent and that particular piece of that opponent, he was my guy. But you can pick a lot of guys because of how they responded to what happened last week. And I know Andy, from reading his player ratings, would say something similar. So that's that's where I'm sitting. I look at what they did, especially with Malacia and that last save. I know Salah scored late, but the save before that De Gea made was just a really good moment for him. I thought he controlled his box as well. So that's my honorable mention.
Okay, Will Callahotch says that Martinez and Varane were outstanding. Don't disagree with that. I think Harry Maguire is going to struggle to get back into this team. And a lot of love for Lisandro Martinez. I mean, Andy, for me, he set the tone early, right? He clattered into Mohamed Salah within the first minute, got up, was in his face, was angry. Salah was putting his hands up saying, I don't really want any part of this. And I feel like the crowd here was just energized. And every time United rattled into challenges in the first half in particular, they just grew in confidence. It got louder and louder here all around us at Old Trafford. So some great defensive displays. Anybody else stand out for you, mate?
Yeah, I think with Martinez, really quickly, I think it's going to be important to remember that this is an acclimation period for him. He's going to have really good games against teams that are much more, I think, possession-oriented, ball on the ground, the way that Liverpool are. We saw how he struggled against Brentford when, they went long and I think a lot of defenders will struggle against the way that Brentford played this season. Anthony Martial, though, to me, really stood out. I think, one, just for the fact that, he is comfortable and fairly natural operating as a center forward. And it's so clear that this United team, whatever you think of Ronaldo aside, is missing a player in that role. And the way that he got on the ball so quickly after he came on at halftime and just slotted it through to Marcus Rashford for the second goal. I made a little quip in the player ratings, and I'll be curious to see how some people will take that. But it's a play that I don't think Ronaldo makes in that situation. One, I don't think he's in that position to win the ball back, to pick it up. But two, the through ball is probably not the first place that he's looking either. And so it's just, I think, having a player to play that role in that position in this team, pushing Rashford out to the left wing where it's so clear he's so much better, I think unlocks a lot of things for this United team. Like, they don't have all of the answers. They don't have everything fixed, but I think they learned a lot about, right? Ten Hag learned a lot about the squad and the players that he's got to work with today.
A lot of great comments and questions coming in, so keep them coming in, guys. I can see you chatting amongst yourselves about where did Liverpool go from here, who stood out for Man United. But Norman said Martinez played like his life depended on it. I actually wrote that in my analysis on Pro Soccer Talk at NBCSports.com. So we are kindred spirits, my friend, because I just think that just really life into the entire United defence, midfield. Once they saw him launching himself into those challenges, blocks. I mean, he was cramping up in the second half, the poor bloke. I mean, and then Bruno Fernandes fires one at him and he somehow keeps it off the line. It was one of those displays where United did get a bit of luck as well when we look back on it. But I think they deserved that luck from their endeavour and just getting on the front foot. Like we said there, in the second half, we assume Malanga came off of an injury because he was really good and just had Alexander-Arnold on toast, didn't he, in the first half, time and time again. He came off at half-time, Martial came on, Rashford went out to the left, and I still think he looks more comfortable as well out on the left, and it worked well. And what I loved is that I kept telling you two, I've been watching Man United closely in pre-season. They are so much better with a fluid front three, with Rashford, Martial, Sancho, Bruno just in behind. And this kind of proved it now. I'm not totally dismissing Ronaldo for all he's done for the club and all his quality, but this was a display where you looked at it and you thought, you know what? I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I just don't see him staying around now. And I think up until this point, we just kind of assumed, he probably will stick around. He probably will start up top. But when those players who are playing instead of him put in that kind of performance, yeah, that's a huge, huge statement. Okay, there's some more comments and questions coming in here. Dylan says, do Liverpool get top 4? And he predicts they don't get top 7. I mean, is it too early in the season for that, Nick Mendola? It's worrying.
Yes, it's 100% too early. They were up there with Arsenal as an XG leader The guys they put out there, obviously, that's the midfield is a bit of a mistake, in my opinion. We don't say that a lot about Jurgen Klopp. They're missing Thiago Alcantara, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. They may sell Naby Keita. I think they may rethink that at this point. I'm missing a midfielder. Thiago, did I already say him? I don't know, but they're missing Fabinho. This is a very good team. They're going to win a lot of games. And I want to talk more about Liverpool, but this also makes me want to make a point about Ten Hag. He is about to put one of the best, very best midfielders in the world in front of it. And if Lisandro Martinez wants to play that aggressive game, Varane is going to be more than happy to hang out back there with his old pal Casemiro. There's already instant chemistry there. Again, they're going to struggle at times this year. They don't have the depth. They're thin. But the point I made in my piece at soccer.nbcsports.com is that you have to take a look at this schedule and you'll think to yourself, they'll get at least one more win against a Big Six side this year because of the talent they have. And today is a day to talk about Ten Hag. He pushed the right buttons. He made the right sub. And that's extremely brave to leave Harry Maguire and Cristiano Ronaldo out of the. I mean, that is extremely brave. What if they lose 5-0 today? Honestly, and I think we all saw that as a possibility. Let's pat him on the back, and you could tell how fired up he was after those goals. So credit to him.
Okay, we got a question coming in here from Espen saying, "Hey guys, what do you think United can do this season if they manage to get some more pieces put into the window? This basically kickstarts United's season." I mean, that's fair enough to say, right? And Casemiro was sat just behind me at Old Trafford. He was lapping up the applause from the fans, and the United fans here had some chants to Jordan Henderson, not very kind ones, saying that you're just the rubbish Casemiro, essentially. But adding him in, and then what, Andy? Adding a couple of one more forward, maybe? Do they need a forward? Do they need another centre-back? Maybe if Maguire leaves? What do they need to take that next step and get back into the top four?
Center forward, I think would be a priority. Martial, obviously, we've already talked about him a little bit. I think they need a little bit more from that position than he's going to give you. I think also another central midfielder as well, though. And on Casemiro, obviously a very, 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 very good and accomplished player coming into that team. He will not fix everything that's wrong with United, though. And so I think that if you look at the setup that he had at Real Madrid with two, generational talents in central midfield playing ahead of him, and Toni Kroos and Luka Modric, it's not to say that they made Casemiro the player that he appears to be today, but obviously makes life a lot simpler and a lot easier for that defensive midfielder if you're not the one that's got to unlock opposing midfields and defenses. And I just look at the rest of that Man United midfield. Aside from Bruno, I don't know where the ball progression comes from. I don't know where the chances created come from still in that team. Obviously, you can get it out wide, and Sancho was really, really good one-on-one, and I think he showed that today. Rashford, good making those runs inside as well, but I still feel like they need another and maybe it's Christian Eriksen. Maybe he's already on the team, and there's going to be maybe a relearning period for Eriksen, and he will slot into the middle of the field, but then that's going to hurt them a little bit defensively as well. So everything with the pieces that they've got at their disposal already, and every player that's potentially available to them, you've got to have a little give and take, I think. If you're Erik ten Hag, you're going to get a little bit more possession with a player like Eriksen, but you're going to be a little bit more exposed defensively. So it's about finding, I think, that right balance for every single game. It's not one answer fits all. And clearly he got it right today against Liverpool.
Got some really good questions coming in. Keep them coming in. We're just going to keep rattling through these. Jaime Morelos says, does Ronaldo leave now, knowing he's behind Martial and the other younger options when healthy? Nick, I joked David Ornstein was sat alongside me in the press box here, and we're like, is Ronaldo fourth or fifth choice now? I mean, it's tough for him to take. So what does he do? That's a really good question.
Well, I was trying to see if he was a Madame Tussauds wax figure, because at certain points they shot him on the bench, and I'm like, it's a little bit like that old Will Ferrell, but you didn't blink, do you? Like that. I was waiting, like, is he breathing? Are we sure he's okay there? I think he needs to leave anyways. I think they want him to leave. They just have to get the right offer for him, and that'll be the question. He is one of the best players to ever play the game, and someone's going to want to put his name on the back of a jersey. But if you're arguing for the success of the team this year, I mean, you saw it today. And I know Alonga was okay. I wasn't as high on him today as you were, but I think Alonga is going to play a lot less if it's going to be Rashford and Martial. And rumors today, right? More reports of Antony potentially coming back in. I think Jadon Sancho is a fantastic player. And you guys know I've been as high on him going back to his Dortmund days. So if I'm Ronaldo, I'm wondering, am I going to adapt to myself to play at that level? And I just can't imagine he is. One more thought on Casemiro, by the way. He's so good in the sort of maybe Rodri sense with a little bit of edge that it'll be a guy like Eriksen, a guy like Donny van de Beek, and Bruno Fernandes. They will be able to play in a different way. But again, this goes back to Andy's point. Adapt. It's going to take some time for them all to get comfortable together.
But he's going to be winning the ball back so often. And when you've got players of that quality on the ball, just spraying it around, it makes a lot of sense. Good question coming in from Matthew Hunter. Andy, let's tackle this one. Liverpool has conceded 5 goals after 3. Virgil hasn't played well. Van Dijk has struggled a bit, to be fair. It's more than just injuries. Why is Liverpool conceding so much? Andy, go ahead and answer that very complicated question.
I know the question was aside from injuries, but I think that might also play a little bit of a part in it with Van Dijk specifically. And I'll just kind of read a little bit here from the player ratings because I tackled that point specifically. The entirety of what Liverpool's run as title contenders in the Premier League, Champions League contenders, Champions League winners, and on and on and on in the cups. Van Dijk showed once or twice every single game, unquestionably, I am the best defender in the world because I can make plays that no one else can make. I can make the plays that literally save a goal, save a game, save 3 points for this team. And I just don't think he's that player anymore. I don't think he's able to make those plays, especially in the open field. And I think United's second goal was a perfect example of that. Peak Virgil van Dijk sees Anthony Martial get on that ball, and he's either straight into him with the challenge and winning the ball back for Liverpool and starting the counter the other way, or he is, before Martial even gets on the ball, running back towards his own goal, making either a slide tackle to cut out the through ball to Rashford, or he's getting in with a last-ditch slide tackle to block the shot, and he's just not that player anymore. And I think there's a huge trickle-down effect for everybody in that Liverpool team because the way they have pressed, the way that they have attacked has all been built on Van Dijk can save us if everything goes wrong, and things do. We always talk about, well, Liverpool are going to give up some chances. They're going to get teams in behind, but Van Dijk always makes the play. I don't think he's making those plays right now, and that's got to be a big reason for those 5 goals in 3 games.
Yeah, United, Palace, we saw it, and it's just so direct. Fulham as well, just getting in behind. It's like teams are reading this playbook just to get in behind, turn them. And this is a great point by Daniel here. Nick, let's discuss this. He says perhaps Liverpool want to have an average season with 1 trophy, and they obviously don't want to, but perhaps they are going to, with 1 trophy and recoup after the extremely fatigued and exhausting last season. That's a good point, right? I mean, I'm sure Jurgen Klopp agrees with that. He's going to be walking past us in a minute into the press conference, but he's been saying it's a really short pre-season, a lot of injuries already. This is going to be right into his playbook, right? I know you love that.
I hate it so much. I like the kind of cheeky point from the look at all this glory we've had for so long, and that's the case. Look, it's Joe Gomez next to Virgil van Dijk. That's gonna hurt him. And I don't mean that Van Dijk's not. I mean Van Dijk used to be that guy where he was out there, so put whatever 3 guys you want with him, and it's probably going to be fine. He had a great tackle early, right? Was it on Rashford? Where he closed him down to the right side and poked it away. So I didn't think he was absolutely terrible, but again, you need a supporting cast, and Fabinho out there makes his life better. Keita makes his life 100%. Better. Thiago, 100%. I mean, holy cow, we talked about how much he changed what they did last year, and it's going to take some adjustment. I mean, Diaz was, I thought, terrible today. I thought he had a really rough time. He worked hard. The endeavor was there. The flash was there. But aside from fouling and getting fouled, I thought he struggled. And Darwin Nunez was a huge miss today. A absolutely huge miss. If you want to talk about Martinez and add into the narrative. So from the back moving forward, right? And I think Andy pointed out his player ratings. Alisson Becker saves one of those goals. A lot of games he saves one of those goals. It takes an exceptional save, but he's good enough to do it. So I just thought it was an all-around down game with a midfield who's not good enough to play against a team with real talent.
I mean, Andy, it kind of points towards a lot of people saying in the comments, Fabinho. And I was just thinking that unless he had an injury, then that is where Klopp and Liverpool kind of lost this game, right? I mean, it's a big moment to put Harvey Elliott in there. James Milner was almost playing as centre forward at times. He was the man getting furthest forward. And Henderson was just left totally exposed there. So United, McTominay, I thought was excellent in dictating the tempo, playing quick balls centrally. That's how we found Bruno to set up Alanga when they hit the post, and United kept playing direct. So was that really tactically where Liverpool, not even tactically, personnel-wise, right, where they just got it wrong? And Jurgen Klopp doesn't get it wrong often, but that was key today.
Yeah, it's again, and to not make excuses for Liverpool, and because we know Klopp will have plenty of his own and everything, but the injuries do matter. I will say this. When they get everybody back, Konate being a big part of that, Thiago being a big part of that, sounds like he'll be out for a while, though. Fabinho, whenever he's maybe ready or Klopp wants him to play 90 minutes, they'll be a better side. But I do worry just a little bit that this could snowball very quickly for Liverpool because, and we have seen it a lot in the past where teams that have a very, very intense style of play, a very demanding kind of manager, as friendly as he seems on the surface, and with the players, he's a bit prickly, and he won't be afraid, I don't think, to show that side to his players if they're not performing up to standard. And at that point, if the results are not going your way and everybody's not having as much fun, everybody's not willing to put up with the demand and the rigors every single day that comes along with playing in a Jurgen Klopp team. It becomes when the proof is no longer there, nobody wants to do everything that's required. And so he's had this before. Let's not forget, and I almost didn't want to bring it up because I don't want to draw too many parallels too quickly, but we've seen this at Dortmund with Klopp before. We remember what his final season was like there, and I'm not saying this is immediately going to turn into that, but I do think it's worth remembering that there is an expiration date for a squad of players, and I think that a few of those players for Liverpool have probably just about reached that point. I think there's also an expiration date for a manager's ideas and how long a set of players and even new players coming in can perform what a manager like Klopp wants. So I'm going to keep an eye on maybe the body language and the vibes around Liverpool the next few weeks and just see how they respond, because if there doesn't appear to be any breaks in the chemistry or everybody putting in the hard work, as Nick pointed out with Luis Diaz, then I think they'll be okay. But the potential is there. It is there.
I mean, looking at some of the reaction there from Andrew Robertson, Liverpool's left back after the game, they keep going behind in games. They keep giving themselves a mountain to climb. And even a team as good as Liverpool can't keep shooting themselves in the foot like this and expect to get out of trouble. So this has been coming for a while, even though I said they've been on a 21-game unbeaten run in the Premier League before today. It's a growing trend. And like we said, slightly worrying. Is it fatigue? Is it a lack of, like you said, Andy, freshness when it comes to the ideas? It's going to be intriguing to see. I'm going to throw a question out there to those in the comments. Thanks so much for your questions so far, by the way. Where do you think Manchester United are going to finish this season? Because a few of us, two out of three of us on this chat, Nick Mandola and I, were pretty high on Man United before the season started, and then weren't feeling too great after the last few weeks. And Andy Edwards there was nodding his head saying, I told you. But I'm intrigued to see if people think, oh, now this is it. We saw signs today where they can push for the top four. I still think that's a big ask this season. But when you look at what's going on at Chelsea, perhaps this Liverpool team have hit some kind of expiry date. This is a huge win. This is a huge moment. Yes, the football could be better, but I think what this is given United as a reference point, right? This is what we have to play like effort-wise each week, and then we have the quality in the final third to actually beat a team like Liverpool. Okay, we got 9th place coming in. Stanley says 7th. Kevin says 14th. Wow, Kev. I think a lot of people were saying that they'd be in the relegation scrap. That's not going to happen. Yeah. It's clearly going to be 2 or 3 more players coming in, right, Andy, between now and the end of the transfer window in less than 10 days' time. But it's looking better for United.
Let me take that question and pose it back to you guys a different way. How long do you think Ten Hag could stomach watching this United team play that way that they did today, without the possession, without the chances so much, if it continues to bring results for them? Because he is such an ideological type manager that it feels like he probably feels right now he is not in complete control of the team because they're not playing the way that he would ideally like to see them play. How long can he put up with that?
Listen, Joe, I think their first 2 games gave him a reason to ring in these changes. If you would have told him at the beginning of the year, when can you take out Ronaldo and Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire, he would have said, it's going to take something. But you lose that game 4-0 and you say, well, no one's expecting us to do anything against Liverpool. Let me throw my guys out there. And I also think that some things have fallen into his lap. If he gets Frankie de Jong, they're not buying Casemiro. And I wonder if you really walked up to him, although he knows de Jong, of course, but if you walked up to him before the year and you said, you can have Frankie, or you can have Casemiro too. I think the difference between the two and what he would have wanted besides age-wise, he would have said, okay, yeah, either one of those will work. So they got some breaks today. They have Southampton and Leicester away next before Arsenal. And I think it'll be a very interesting watch. I'm still going to say there's an absolute outside shot at the top four because of who they're going to bring in. And because I did not expect Liverpool and Chelsea to look this inconsistent. And Tottenham and Arsenal, as good as I think they are, and I think Tottenham is clear of the field, they haven't hit their bumps yet. And how those young-ish or newish teams react to those bumps will be a big deal. Liverpool's putting a top four spot back in play right now, guys. And I wanted to put more question mark exclamation points. I think they'll finish there. I still think they'll finish second. But I wanted to put more question mark exclamation point question marks in my tweet about them being 2 points. What do you do there?
Yeah, I mean, Ibrahima in the comments seems to think it's all because Sadio Mane left, so he's left a few comments there. And yeah, it's interesting to see the reaction from both fan bases. I mean, United, I think their fans, it's what they wanted to see, that performance, but they still perhaps don't think they have enough this season to finish in the top four. And this wasn't really a game when we saw them tactically prove that they have Erik ten Hag's ideas under wraps. That's going to take a while. But again, like I said, it was devoid in the first two games, but they saw spirit, they saw determination. And sometimes you can just will yourself to win in a game. And that's what Manchester United did today. And Liverpool didn't quite have it. They were off it for sure. So keep your questions and comments coming in. We are going to wrap up our reaction analysis on Manchester United's big 2-1 win against Liverpool. But over on Pro Soccer Talk and NBCSports.com, you have a lot more going on. The three lads you can see on the screen. We have player ratings, 3 things we learned, recaps. We'll have more reaction from the managers and players throughout this evening. But now let's switch gears a little bit, guys, and talk about a big weekend for the USMNT players in the Premier League. I mean, it was a really good weekend for the Leeds United players in particular. Tyler Adams, man of the match, voted for by Leeds fans. Brendan Aronson got his first goal in the Premier League and was brilliant in their 3-0 win against Chelsea. Andy, I want to come to you. What were you thinking when you saw those two American players playing so well for Leeds United against Chelsea in that incredible atmosphere at Elland Road? That was, and coached by Jesse Marsh, obviously an American as well. That was quite the moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was cool to see, but more than anything, I was just thankful for Tyler Adams backing up everything that we've ever said about him on this show, because we have been a very, very pro Tyler Adams show with regards to the U.S. men's national team, the importance that he has to that team, the way that he controls things defensively and starts the counterattacks going forward. We saw a true Tyler Adams performance against Chelsea in that game, and it's exactly why Jesse Marsh, I'm sure, was very adamant that this is a player that I need for this team. If I'm going to be given what I need to play the way that I want to, then I need a Tyler Adams in my team. He's had him at New York Red Bulls. He had him at Salzburg. And he had him again at Leipzig. He had Aronson at Salzburg. And so the familiarity of some of those players that I think that he has, I think gives him a little bit of comfort. And I think the understanding, the previous understanding of the way that he wants to play, I think is why those two have started so brightly for this team. I think the biggest thing for Leeds, though, to continue this momentum going forward, especially with the two U.S. men's national team players, is going to be health, because Aronson has had some injuries in his career already. Adams has had quite a few injuries that have kept him out of the team, back in, back out of the team. And so if he can keep them fresh, he can keep them fit without having to deal with, European competition the way that they both had to do at their previous clubs, I think will help them individually just a little bit more and to add more to the collective that is Leeds United. But it was so exciting to see those two new American players come in and have the impact on not just a Premier League game, but a big Premier League game. Yeah. The atmosphere that was there inside of Elland Road, going up against Chelsea. We'd just seen what Chelsea did against Tottenham the week before, and boom, it didn't matter to them.
It was brilliant. And Nick, obviously everyone get your questions in on USMNT players in the Premier League, from the brilliant Aronson and Adams show to obviously situation regarding Christian Pulisic. Is he going to stay at Chelsea? Is he going to go? We'll talk about that as well. But Nick, how important is it that Jesse Marsh gets off to a great start this season at Leeds United. That's huge for him, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And I think when you've got as much fire as he brings to everything, you need success to go with it, because it's not a hairdryer treatment. The guy's just a ball of energy. You saw the way he celebrated that first goal against Chelsea because his plan was coming together. But I think when you're a guy like Marsh, when you're a guy like, Antonio Conte is a little bit of a different story because he's had so much success. But that personality, you can start to turn off players if it's not going in your direction. And think about the players they have around there. There was a really good chance for rebirth. And one thing I'll point to as something impressive for me is Calvin Phillips goes. They've had some mainstays go. Rafinha goes. Rodrigo responding to getting the armband. 4 goals to lead the Premier League so far. I think there have been some really good moves there from Jesse Marsh. He's pushed the right buttons, but we've seen how quickly it can fall apart. We can just point to an American, right? If you have a team that's substandard and it doesn't deliver within 10 games or 11 games, you can be Bob Bradley and out of a job at Swansea. So, and we've seen a million managers. So that's not a shot at Bob. We've seen a million managers wash out after 10 to 15 games. So I think it's a really, really good situation to come out well, winning, scoring, defending, and getting performances out of new players.
It certainly was fun to see and see the reaction, the Major League Soccer, Leeds United States of America, the Yorkshire Yanks, all these kind of things flying out there. So let's get to some of your questions here on USMNT. There's some coming in here, but Andy, in terms of, Zach Taylor, this is more of a comment. Pulisic should leave. I think he could seriously realise his potential in a different environment where he isn't overshadowed by similar players. I mean, do we agree with that, Andy Edwards? What do we think about Pulisic's situation? Because the latest reports say that he could come here, but apparently that isn't on the cards anymore because Chelsea are like, hang on a minute, our forwards aren't playing great, so we'll probably keep you around. Sorry, Kristen.
We, as a collective, the three of us have not talked about this. Does anybody here want that? Because I don't. I do not want that, because I think, one, if we're talking about overshadowed by similar players and being redundant as a player, he would be even more redundant at Manchester United, where we just saw Marcus Rashford on the left wing have a really, really strong game. Well, you want to talk about he can play on the right side. We just saw Jadon Sancho have a really, really strong game. These are both players that I think, one, for the fact they're established at United a little bit at least, and two, just their profile. I think they would overshadow him as well. So I don't know that Manchester United is maybe the right answer. I'm coming around, especially after what we saw from Newcastle against Manchester City on the weekend. I'm very, very much coming around on the idea of him going there, because the way that they play, I think, would fit him really, really well. It would obviously give them depth with St. Max. It would give them a very different look to anything that I think they have right now. We talked about that last week, whether right now, before the transfer deadline would be the time, or in January after the World Cup, because uprooting everything is it's not as easy as people, I think, tend to think it is. You don't just, and I get reminded this every summer. We see the videos of new signings meeting all of their new teammates for the first time, and it's that awkward kind of dap each other up, hug each other. I know who you are because I know your name as a player, but I don't know you. And it's just really weird. And to think about doing that 20, 30, 40, 50 times with all your new teammates, all your new staff and everything at a point like that, it's really difficult to then just go out on the field and immediately hit the ground running and be the very best version of yourself. And that's exactly what the U.S. needs from Pulisic at the World Cup.
Hey, before we talk about the World Cup team, Stanley Phillips has got a really good question here. Do we think the American Leeds players will stay there if they have a good year?
Yes.
Do they see it? It's a good stepping stone in some ways, but it's a huge club, and it's just, I don't think they've even scratched the surface of the potential of them being back in the Premier League, right?
Yeah, they stayed together in the Red Bull family to play for Marsh, arguably, whether that be at Leipzig or Salzburg. I mean, these guys are following him. I actually think there's a little bit of FIFA manager mode here to the fact that I still don't believe that they went over with him, that Marsh said, hey, here are the guys in the market. They're both American guys. I know he went all in. Credit to Jesse Marsh here to embrace this with both hands. I think they'll both stay not as long as he's there, but for next year, provided he's there as well. And Leeds is a huge club. I mean, how many clubs have had movies made about them? I know it was more about Brian Clough, but Leeds is a absolutely huge club.
It is huge. I want to finish with some comments. to see what people think. But I mean, Brendan Aronson, is he a guaranteed starter for the US at the World Cup? Because we're looking at Pulisic, Reyna. Obviously, a lot of the forwards are scoring right now, so I'm intrigued to see what people think in the comments. But what do we think? I mean, I don't want to say this, but is he actually starting over Christian Pulisic right now? I mean, it's going to be controversial, but I don't know. The kid's good.
He was
the great thing is
too. Yeah.
Yeah, the great thing is the World Cup's not right now, so we don't have to actually answer this at the moment. We've got a few more months of evidence and a body of work for these players to put together. But I definitely think that it's, we talk about who's the most important or the best player for the U.S. men's national team. I think the way that Aronson applies himself defensively as well is just different to any other attacker, certainly any other attacker in the U.S. men's national team pool, because, I mean, he made his goal for himself. That was a ball back to Edouard Mendy. He doesn't really have any business chasing that down, but he did, and look at the payoff that he got. And so I think if you're talking about how the team functions best from the start of a game and gets you to the 60-minute mark, and then potentially, a player like Pulisic to come into the game and attacking wise really change things. It's good to have options. It's really good to be Greg Berhalter right now, I think.
It is. Do you agree with that, Nick?
Yeah, the way that Aronson tucked inside a lot. I mean, at times he looked like a number 10 out there, and that allows Christian Pulisic to stay wide. I think Gio Reyna is the odd man out. You can't count on him to be fit right now. I think Reyna's World Cup is going to be a busy one, but we're looking at him more as I hate saying this, but he's like, I expect him to hit his prime on home soil. Aronson's looked really impressive. Of course, anybody can dip out of form. The end of September is going to be a huge window for this team and for these guys. I mean, Jordan Pivac's going to have to take his chance to take that center forward role. Timothy Weah is going to have to show where he's at. I think Pulisic's the man, but I just keep looking at that World Cup schedule. That first game is huge. If you blow it by playing guys who can't hack it or letting them play their way out of a spot, make that England game a must-win, gee whiz. I mean, you have to win that first game. So you have to know what you're doing by the end of September and start sending tactical plans out there. You have to know what you're doing now, but the center forward spot is in question.
I feel like this isn't the last time we're going to talk about England against the USA between
Start
now
McGuire.
and November. Oh, wow. Okay, so quickly to round up the other US players playing well, obviously Tim Ream and Anthony Robinson. Fulham had a great start to life back in the Premier League, got that big win against Brentford at the weekend. Chris Richards coming off the bench late for Palace. He'll work his way into that system, I think, and have plenty of opportunities. Matt Turner behind Aaron Ramsdale, but he knew that going into the season, and I think he'll play a lot in the League Cup, Europa League coming up. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. But over at Pro Soccer Talk and NBCSports.com, we'll keep you updated with all the latest US MNT news. Nick has his player pool rankings. I have my weekly update on how these US players are doing in the Premier League. And as we said, Adams and Aronson are leading the charge, and that was wonderful to see at Leeds United as they got that big win against Chelsea, and those two were absolutely key for Jesse Marsh, the Wisconsin native, of course, another American to shoehorn him in there. That was, a really, really nice moment to see for us. Okay, now let's focus on previewing week 4 of the Premier League. Let's look ahead to what's coming up in just a few days' time. Southampton against Manchester United is the early kickoff. Chelsea against Leicester. We have Manchester City against Crystal Palace, Liverpool, Bournemouth. Nick Mendola, I'm going to come to you, but everyone else, get your comments in. What are you looking forward to this weekend? Some score predictions maybe for Man United's trip to Saints. Now they got a win off and they're off and running under Erik ten Hag. Chelsea, can they beat Leicester? Leicester are struggling. Man City, they're just going to keep flying. Palace are good though. And then Liverpool, can they get their first win of the season in the 4th time of asking against Bournemouth? But Nick Mendola,
Yes.
What are you looking forward to this weekend, mate?
That's my first answer. That's the lock. If Liverpool doesn't win this weekend, my head might literally explode. And that's nothing against the Cherries, but you're going back to Anfield. Again, Andy Robertson said after the game against Manchester United that it was that Old Trafford was the quietest he had ever heard it before kickoff, that things were that down. And he went as far as saying, he said, we let them take that game with an early goal. Anfield will not be quiet. And I would bet, I shouldn't say that. I'll use different words. If I were to prognosticate, I would prognosticate that Liverpool picks up a multi-goal win. against the Cherries, who I feel terrible for Scott Parker. Is he being judged on Man City, Liverpool, and who am I missing? Arsenal in 3 straight weeks? Dear
Tough.
Lord.
I know. Andy, what about Manchester United away at Southampton? Did you see enough today in this defeat of Liverpool to say they'll give the Saints plenty of problems down at St Mary's?
I think it's going to be a really fascinating experiment to find out how they're going to play against a team that's not Liverpool. I think this is going to be the formula against the other big 6 sides for United this season, because 1, we've seen it work, and 2, I just think it's the most realistic approach. But when they have to go to St. Mary's and they've got to, with all due respect to Southampton, they've got to control the game and dominate the game and take the team to the opponent. What's it going to look like? Because we saw them try to do that for 2 weeks. We know that Ralph Hasenhüttl likes to press a little bit. He knows that we know that he'll put United under a little bit of pressure. And if they apply a little bit of that, are United simply going to fold again? Is Casemiro, I think, going to be ready to start? I think is going to be really important, because then we get to finally see this team start to evolve into what it's going to become. But I look at everybody else, especially in the midfield, and I guess the defense as well, because that was where the real problems were playing out from the back. Are they going to have the same issues, or will he continue to be, realistic, pragmatic, however you want to kind of frame it? Will he continue with that? Like, that's the number one thing I think around the whole entire Premier League that I'm curious to see over, say, the next month or so.
If I was worried, Joe, sorry. No, I was going to say, if I was Saints and I was worried a little bit about how I'm going to attack them, I'm thinking with Maguire out, I feel, and I hate to pile on, but I want to have Kyle Walker-Peters and Moussa Djenepo and these guys lumping balls towards their center forwards and asking him to deal with them, because that's where he struggled at. A great ball player. Maguire is still a good passer, but he struggled with there. And what's interesting to me is Saints, Joe, you'd be the one to ask this, but I think they've played a pretty much a different midfield except for Lavia and Ward-Prowse. He's been trying to find the right mix of in there. And, if Romeo goes back in there, is Casemiro, are we going to see a fist fight? I don't know. But I want to know what Saints are putting out there, and is Casemiro ready to start?
Well, Chris and Brenda Ramsgaard just simply say up the Saints, so that's something I can get behind as a Southampton native. But it is going to be interesting, because against Leicester City, they're sitting back and they're just keeping themselves in games. Even if they go behind, they have an extra gear. Hasenhüttl loves to get 5 subs off the bench, brought Che Adams off the bench, scored twice. It's almost got like they're playing 2 games within a game. Of course, it's a step up in class for the players that Man United have, the individual quality. But Saints, as Andy mentioned, they have the high pressing in their system that they can do, and they really can pull that off well. We've seen over the years, but also they now have a slightly more robust nature to them. And Bella Kotchap, Lavia, Bazzuno, all good young players they brought in, and they could cause United some problems for sure. It'll be a totally different game. Looking around at other games, keep an eye on Forest against Spurs. Forest, as we all thought, sneaky good. Spurs, though, perfect so far, Andy. They're looking okay, but tough to go to the City ground. It's a great atmosphere there. Arsenal against Fulham, London derby. The Gunners, again, they're perfect and looking really, really good, with Gabby Jesus leading the show for Mikel Arteta. And Brighton Leeds, 2 teams who could have an outside chance of maybe pushing into the top 6. Who knows? They're going to ride that early season momentum. Lovely teams to watch. High pressing, one of them. Brighton, bit high pressing, but lovely flowing football as well. So some really good games this weekend. And Nick, he's flapping his arms there.
So good.
He loves the Seagulls. Seagulls. But some really, really good games coming up across the Premier League this weekend. Gents, should we finish with some comments? Let's get some Q&A, just quick fire. Everybody who's watching, send in questions for us to answer on any Premier League team. Had so much fun joining you from Old Trafford tonight, and thanks so much for your interaction. It's made it really fun on a really fun night and a great atmosphere. Let's start with a couple of comments here. Carlos Gutierrez says, I do feel like Man United can reach a Europa League spot at minimum. Beating a recent Champions League winner and with great play, it says a lot about their potential. So Carlos, I think we all agree with that. A Europa League spot, even if United worst case scenario, that should be what they're getting, right, Andy? I mean, should we elaborate on that, or is that pretty much the lowest? That's the bar is set for Man United. They cannot finish lower than 6th.
It would stabilize the club, I think, in a way that the Europa League for any Big 6 side could never do. I think if they could stop the rot right there that has been occurring over the last number of years. If Ten Hag in one season could maintain where they were at last season, not have to take a massive step backwards, not be out of Europe completely next season, then I think that's a real platform to build on going forward next season. So I think that should be obviously the aim, and I think it's completely realistic. Yeah, I do.
Nick, here's a good one from Stanley Phillips. Who do you think will be relegated this year? Have we changed our mind given what we've seen in the opening few weeks of the season? Good question.
Well, no, I don't know. Saints to me are the one that I was struggling between Saints and Everton. You guys mentioned, I'll bring Pulisic back into this discussion again. I think that is still a good fit for him. I'll go there and be their star, because right now they are completely hanging their hats on an Anthony Gordon guy who is a good player but is not a savior type. And with Calvert-Lewin out, I mean, they have to get an attacker. So I had Everton down. Saints, I think they're going to find a recipe. So I would dip Everton back in there, but I'm not changing my mind on Bournemouth. And I still think Fulham, when all said is done, is gonna struggle to keep it out of the net.
Andy, I kind of do worry about the three newly promoted teams still. Forest look decent, but can they do it all season long? They're still riding that euphoria being back in the Premier League. Bournemouth and Fulham have looked better than we thought. Bournemouth, it's hard to tell with them, right? They've had such tough fixtures to start the season, and then they surprised us by beating Villa on the opening day. So have you changed your mind about any of the relegated teams? Because I think Zach Taylor's saying that Wolves could be a genuine shout if they keep it up. So a bit worried about Wolves?
Yeah, I definitely am. We saw that they struggled to create chances for years under Nuno. We saw last season they struggled to create chances under Bruno Lage. They still struggle to create chances under Bruno Lage. I think playing against Spurs is going to be a difficult proposition for a lot of teams, especially to create chances. But if you're not able to score goals in the Premier League, you're not going to stay in the Premier League. They're not going to concede, I don't think, probably enough to go down this season, but they need to. If they don't want to be in the conversation for relegation, I think they're going to need to score some more goals. I think the one team that I predicted Leicester 17th going into the season. I think I had them the team that just missed relegation. And what I have seen from them the first three games is actually worse than I thought we would see from them this season. And so I do worry. We talked a little bit with Liverpool about, under Jurgen Klopp, the expiration date of the manager and the ideas and the squad as well. I'm not so sure that the King Power is not, going to be expired this season, just for how long they've had that squad together. And I don't think Brendan Rodgers is much of a. This is no shot at him, but I don't think he's a tweaking, tactician type manager. He's not going to completely reinvent that team. He is a motivator, and if they're not listening to the motivator's motivation, then what does he have for them?
Yeah, a lot of negative vibes, bad vibes around Leicester, given they haven't really brought in anyone this summer, losing key players. It's tough to get that momentum back once you lose it. A lot of comments here about Everton. Ian saying Lampard's not a great coach. Carlos not liking what Everton is putting on. Yeah, I think Everton as well are a team I'd worry about getting sucked into there with those newly promoted teams. Everton, Wolves and Leicester, kind of teams that have just gone a bit stale, I think. But have quality. So who knows? It's still early in the season, as a lot of people were saying in the comments. This is your last chance here to get in any comments you want for us, any questions.
Joe,
live Q&A here from Old Trafford. Go ahead, Nick.
No, let me ask you something. I'll ask you both this. Do you feel comfortable making any predictions at all, given that a World Cup's going to be dropped into the middle of this season? And we know what happens in any transfer market after a World Cup. James Rodriguez, remember, he was the hot name. And even at a lesser extent, there'll be heroes we've never heard of. It was the goalie from Northern Ireland that got everybody. That might have been after a Euro. Michael, can't remember the name. McGovern, was it? Yeah. I think it's very difficult even now. Like, that was the thing that popped in my head when you mentioned, are we down on Liverpool? I'm like, no, because there's going to be so much that happens in January. And there are going to be new stars, guys who dip in confidence, guys who have to deal with the press in their own country and the monumental stress that comes with that. And alone, we know a guy from Canada, a guy from the U.S., a guy from Iran. These guys are going to be a star for a couple of weeks, and crazy transfers are going to happen.
We got a good question coming in here from Robles. What's your thoughts on West Ham due to their woeful start that could cost them a top 10 place? Andy Edwards, you want to tackle that?
No goals, no points through 3 games. I don't know. I hate to keep making the same point over and over again, but David Moyes, been there for a little bit, very demanding type coach. It doesn't seem like they have quite the right players, I don't think, for the defensive system that he typically tends to play. And so I think they're struggling in midfield a little bit. Declan Rice, I think if this is what West Ham are going to be all season, I think he's pretty quickly going to want to be out of the London Stadium. So I'm also worried for West Ham because it's another team that just has had no ideas going forward. And I know they spent a lot of money on Scamacca to bring finally the center forward that they've been looking for so long. And 3 games in, I know he's not played a lot to this point, but it's just not a great system. It's not a great setup for him to be dropped into at the moment, is it?
But they went for him. They went for him and Maxwell Cornet in the Conference League game. They both scored. They win 3-1. I think they prioritized that over this weekend, and I think both of those guys are in their best 11. I really do. And until Antonio has struggled, right? So until Scamacca isn't scoring goals after 2 months, and he's the latest Haller or Arnautovic, that's the point where I'll really start to worry about West Ham.
2 quick ones to finish on here. Firstly, we are going to go with a question on Tottenham Hotspur. Do you think Tottenham can consistently grind through results the way they did this weekend? Andy Edwards, as our resident Spurs expert at PST, I'm coming to you.
Have you ever watched an Antonio Conte team before? Yeah, I think they can. It's what they do. It's not going to. They're not going to blow teams away the way that Arsenal or City are going to have the capability to create goals to score 3-4 every single weekend. But I do think that the game against Wolves is a perfect example. It feels on paper, they really snuck that one out against a team that's currently sitting in 18th place and has just 1 point on the season. But did they really? They were in complete control of that game. They were never threatened. They were never at risk of not drawing that game. And it was just a matter of, can they get 1 goal in this game? And I think that Conte has the tactical ideas and is we talk about fearless with regards to Erik ten Hag and the changes that he made for the game against Liverpool. Antonio Conte is not afraid to bring anyone off or to drop anyone in any team that he has ever managed. And so if that needs to be done, I think Conte will push all the right buttons to, we're talking about just consistently grinding through results. I think obviously top 4 is the target this season. And depending on what Liverpool do, definitely closing the gap to them a little bit.
Ruthless. I think he's added a ruthless streak, and that is seeped into his Tottenham team right now, and they just have a bit more resilience. A couple more quick fire answers to these. Isaac says, can we agree Liverpool may need to invest in another central midfielder? This Henderson and Milner combination have no creativity and no composure. I'm going to take this one. I think, as we're seeing today, it was a lot of injuries, especially in midfield. Fabinho's a huge player. Thiago's a huge player. Henderson is coming towards the end of his brilliant career at Liverpool. And I think we're just seeing, as we said, maybe it needs to be freshened up a little bit more, Liverpool. Maybe they're regretting slightly spending most of their transfer budget on Darwin Nunez this summer, and maybe they should have strengthened in other areas. But there could be something going on. It feels like in the final days of the transfer window, depending if Naby Keita leaves, there's reports he might not be that happy with a new contract situation. Let's wait and see what happens there. Let's finish with this question here on Manchester United. Christopher Lugo says, should Ten Hag keep this defensive pairing and Varane and Martinez going forward? Given their display tonight, Nick Mendola, I'd say they have to. Harry Maguire now is looking at a long time on the bench, it would seem. But this wraps up the chat quite nicely, I think, to talk about how good United were defensively.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I don't think Maguire's going to go anywhere because I don't know who wants to take on his wages. And it's not that he's necessarily – it's a problem we see with a lot of guys. That's why Jesse Lingard stuck around Manchester United as long as possible. It wasn't that people didn't want him. It's that he's making a lot of money. He'd like to continue making that a lot of money, and I tend to side with the worker in this scenario, right? So I just don't know who's going to take Maguire. Chelsea might have been a situation. One of these teams that plays a back 3 might have been a good situation for him, but he's going to have to stay. He'll be valuable. He will. He's not a bad player. It's just Andy makes this point a lot, Joe. With Manchester United, we're used to holding their players to a different standard. And he's a good center back. He's just not the sort of center back you want when you think about Manchester United of 10 years ago. But they're not there anymore right now.
That's right. It's a new rebuild. It's a new project. But my word, wasn't it? A very positive game tonight for them. Great win. They needed that one. And yeah, this has been great, gents. Thanks so much for joining me for this very special Pro Soccer Talk Live Q&A. Thanks everyone for your questions. That's the main reason we're doing this. We love interacting with you guys and you putting us on the spot with all these great questions. They've been absolutely brilliant. So yeah, head over to Pro Soccer Talk. You see it at the bottom of the screen there. And NBCSports.com for the latest Premier League news. We'll have you covered. USMNT focus, how to watch all these great games, analysis, reaction. We'll be at stadiums like this all season long. And I'm going to finish with showing you guys the Theatre of Dreams in all its glory. It's all quiet now. It was crazy earlier. But just soak this in. This is a really nice way to end this live chat, I think, Jen. So thanks so much for joining me. And yeah, have a look at this. Doesn't get much better than that.
There's
Good
Sergio
night.
Dest.
Oh, well. Good night from Manchester. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And yeah, head over to PST and the three lads on the screen will keep you updated all season long. Crazy start to the Premier League season, summed up by this game tonight. What a win for Manchester United. And I feel like, gents, we are only just getting started because the craziness is going to continue for the next 9 months. And then, yeah, we got a World Cup in the middle of that as well. So thanks so much for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for watching. And we'll speak to you all very soon indeed. Cheers, guys.